Hello, everybody. So happy to spend the morning with you in Chicago. And I got up 2 hours too early. I was so excited, so.
Thanks for joining us. Thanks, everyone. Good morning. Wow, full house, huh? Good morning, everyone up in the nosebleeds of the orchestra hall. Thank you for joining us. So the theme of this, I have so many notes. The theme of the festival this year is power, and so I wanted to start there. How has your writing changed or charged your relationship with power?
Well, I don't, I'm not sure I could answer that except to say that I have been writing since I was about 7 or 8 years old. It's the one consistent vocation that I've had my whole life. And as I've gotten better and developed my skills, it gives me a lot of innate confidence. I mean, I feel a lot more confidence about my writing. And when confidence is a powerful feeling. It allows you to negotiate life better. But also, writing gives you a way, whether it's performing or talking to people, writing a little caption on my Instagram, anything. It's communication with people. And positive communication has its own empowering aspect.
Mm-hmm.
You can tell I'm just waking up, right? Even though I've been awake for hours, I haven't been talking.
And speaking of your Instagram, and also in this book and M-Train, it seems like you have a very particular relationship with birthdays. People ask you to shout out their birthdays all the time, but also it seems that you're in a constant state of remembering and honoring people's birthdays. Why are birthdays so important to you?
Well, I mean, it's the day we come on Earth. I love my birthday. I was born in Chicago, December 30th, 1946. So it works that way too. When I come to Chicago, I feel very excited to be in the city, but I was born here. I had my first breath here, and and my first thoughts here. So birthdays are very important. I have one little funny thing. When I was young, I loved Willem de Kooning, and I found out his birthday was April 24th. And when I was a teenager, I would send him birthday cards every year to his gallery, every year. And then sometime later in like 1971 or 72, I became friends with Bryce Marden. And Bryce Marden introduced me to Mr. de Kooning. We were in a bar in New York City. And it was April, and I said, "Oh, Mr. de Kooning, it was just your birthday. Happy birthday." And he said to me, "Was that you?"
In your books and your writing, you definitely talk about and write about, having and sometimes carrying these totems and talismans and bits of things to remember people and places. Do you have any of those sort of things related to Chicago? What are your totems of Chicago or talismans of this city?
Well, my totem of Chicago is myself, like I said. Well, I have my baby book. My mother made me a baby book. She wrote me a poem called Patti, and I still have it with our addresses, pictures of her on Kedzie Boulevard, where we lived in a rooming house. I have my baptismal certificate because I was baptized in Logan Square. And, but truthfully, I've always been welcomed in Chicago. And so my secret talisman is just that. I've always felt very well loved here. So That's my best talisman.
So you wrote this book. Let's talk about this book. So much of this book transpires in California, and also in kind of a California of the mind. And I was wondering, what were the things that really helped, or what were the things that sort of informed your imagination of California before you actually saw it for yourself?
Well, actually, I'm a real East Coast girl, and I mean, I was raised on the East Coast after we left Chicago, and I didn't go to California till we toured horses, and I think I saw my first palm tree in Los Angeles, and had my first, went to my first Taco Bell, and but California to me was all cultural. First of all, the beat scene, the West Coast beat scene, Ray Bremser, the California poet, and then there was Art Pepper, I think, was a West Coast player. And so, you know, the California beats, and then, of course, the great music that came out of San Francisco. To me, California is, it's the Grateful Dead, you know, it's the Jefferson Airplane. So it's City Lights books, these type of things. But, you know, that's my particular association. But in this book, because I was roaming about because of circumstances, I became more attuned with its other kind of landscape, with Joshua Tree, with the desert, you know, with the old motels. And so that's sort of the California in my book.
Being very much allied with New York, but as you said, having been born of the Midwest and spending some time here, what of the Midwest do you think you carry as a writer? What parts of the Midwest, your time in the Midwest, what have they imbued into your writing, do you think?
Well, I think the book M-Train has the most of my Midwest influence, because in 1979 I left public life and went to Detroit and married my love, Fred Sonic Smith. I lived there for 16 years, had my children in Detroit, and spent a lot of time in the general Midwest area. So somehow I'm sure that it permeates my work, but more important, in the 16 years that I was out of public life, I spent an enormous amount of time when I didn't have family obligations, working on my writing, in solitude, working on my writing. And it's because of the time that I spent in the Midwest, I was able to write a book about New York, a book about my time in New York, Just Kids. I really honed my skills in Michigan, and up in the, you know, I loved the Great Lakes area too, and my husband and I spent a lot of time at the Great Lakes, a lot of writing time, a lot of mental and cerebral time, and so I suppose that's been a major influence.
One of the other pieces that threads through this book and M-Train both is your dreams. Are dreams a refuge for you? Are they a place of communion?
Well, I've always been a big daydreamer. In fact, my report cards from first, second, and third grade, it would say every single teacher, it was almost like in a conspiracy. They'd say, Patti Lee is potentially intelligent, but she daydreams too much. Yeah. Patti Lee looks out the window all the time. Patti Lee has something else on her mind. And yeah, it was always, my imagination was always very fertile. I always loved reading. I would write stories in my head. And, you know, the whole class would be learning Dick and Jane, and I'd be writing like, you know, a 19th century novel in my head. But And so some of it is dreaming, some of it's imagination. And so I have waking dreams, sleeping dreams, daydreams. And so you're right, it's a big part of my sleeping and waking life.
It also seems like you're very willing to kind of let the spell of a dream spill out into life or spill out onto the page. Why do you think that is?
I don't know. Your imagination is your friend. I spend a lot of time on my own, and you know, I don't have any trouble. Like when I was little, I would talk to my toothbrush. I had my toothbrush served me. It took care of my teeth. And one day, I was coming home from school. I came home from school, and my mother said, "Patricia, it's time for a new toothbrush because you've had the other one a long time." And I was horrified. Well, what's going to happen to the old toothbrush? Oh, I threw it away. I was like, oh, you threw it away? You know, it's my pal. I talk to it every morning. So I had to like dig out the old toothbrush and hide it. Like in our old apartment, we had floorboards that were loose, and so I hid it in there with a few other strange objects. But also, you know, like in M Train, the book before Year of the Monkey begins with a cowpoke I dreamed of, who was really Sam Shepard. And the cowpoke really spills out through the whole book, talking to me. In Year of the Monkey, I have some inanimate objects talking to me. But for me, it's not weird, you know. I don't have a problem talking to inanimate objects. Sometimes they're very, very interesting, more interesting than people. Present company excluded.
I think, you know, so much of your writing is so rich. These memories are so rich. How, over the course of, you know, as you've begun to publish books that are more, you know, memoir in nature, obviously you have a lot of works of poetry. How has your relationship, or perhaps your willingness to write the past, changed? Has it evolved?
Well, that's a good question. I always wrote fiction, poetry and fiction, or imaginary pieces about artists or poets I liked. But Robert Mapplethorpe asked me to write our youthful story the day before he died, and I couldn't refuse him. And I had never written nonfiction, extended nonfiction, unless it was a piece about Jim Morrison or something. And it took me over a decade to write the book and to really study, to think about it, to think about how I wanted to present, you know, present our relationship, present New York City, present things about myself in a truthful, accurate, and fair way. And I have a very good memory from my early childhood and for my time with Robert, very, very strong memories. But also I have really good primary materials. My mother every year for my birthday would give me these little diaries. They're like teenage-style diaries. And so you have this much room to write what happened the whole day. So I wasn't going to develop as a writer with those, but the useful thing is I kept them. And so like 1970, it would, you know, be like, cut Robert's hair like a rockabilly star. Robert went to a taxi dance, saw the pop art exhibit, met Janis Joplin. And then I'd look and I think, are you serious? That's all you have to say? Met Janis Joplin? But my strong memories of these things, I was able to fill in almost our daily life. And that's how Just Kids has that sort of cinematic flow, because I could look and see pretty much what we were doing, what moon phase it was, or what books I was reading, what films I went to, and it was very helpful in the flow of the book. And, but it was so much responsibility, and that's why I loved writing M-Train, and now this book is probably my most irresponsible memoir, because M-Train was 80% true or 90% true, with some fantasy woven, and this is sort of questionable. I mean, there's a lot of true stuff, but sometimes I see it in like nonfiction and I go, oops. But they don't really know where to put it, so they stick it in nonfiction. And, but the next book I write is only going to be maybe 30% true, so I'm curious as where they'll stick it. I don't know if that answered your question at all.
I mean,
sorry.
I have no agenda. So, is writing a way to reinscribe someone into the world for you?
Wow, that's a nice way to put it. I like that, reinscribe. I don't use that word. That's a good one. I feel like writing it down for later.
You can have my card when I'm done with this.
I'll take it too. Actually, yes. That's what really Robert wanted me to do, because Robert didn't, when he was dying, he was only 42. He didn't want to be remembered simply as a groundbreaking or groundbreaking photographer who had AIDS. He wanted to be remembered holistically, hopefully, as an artist. And because I knew him so young and witnessed the evolution of his work, I could give that to the people. I've lost so many people. My husband died young. My brother died young. My pianist, beautiful pianist, died young. And these people, I'm sure in the next few years I'll be writing more about them. I love that in the context of a memoir, you can make flesh some people that might have been somewhat forgotten or never known had you not, given them another life through writing. So it's a perfect way to describe it. Thank you.
Thanks. Glad I could be of use.
This place is awesome.
Isn't it? I think the first time I came here, the pillar that's like 2 pillars up,
yeah.
I sat behind that and saw a Finnish opera.
That might be the place to see it.
Yeah.
No, just joking.
And
just joking.
I won't tell them you said that. But because I couldn't, I was kind of like, after a while, I kind of gave up looking around the pillar and just listened. And I looked over, and my friend, who was also kind of half-trapped behind the pillar, we're both sort of like scrunched down. I look over at some point, we're both sort of crying and scrunched up and listening to the opera. And it's so
Well, it's the human voice. Yeah. My first opera I ever saw was in the Chicago Opera. I was doing a show called Charlie Cups or something, Your Coffee with Charlie. I don't know, it was in 1977. Yeah, that one. And it would have like 5 guests on it, all having coffee in the morning. And it was Colleen Dewhurst and some other people and a couple of opera singers. And I love opera, and I had never met an opera singer in person. And I noticed that the only person really talking was Colleen Dewhurst, who was a great storyteller, and then another person, and then they'd ask me stuff, but they were ignoring the opera singers. So I started asking the opera singers questions, and then we were talking about Puccini and what they were doing, and they asked me if I was going, and I said, no, I couldn't afford to go to the opera. And I didn't have the right clothes. I only had a motorcycle jacket and, black pants. And the guy said, I'll get you a ticket. It's sold out, but just use my name. Just go to the box office and give me your name. So I did. So that night, I had a night off in Chicago. Sorry this has taken so long. But,
I got nowhere else to be.
But it's a good Chicago story. So I I have my motorcycle jacket, and I go to the Chicago Opera, and it's some big premiere, and I walk in, and I look down, and it's like people like in evening gowns and like, you know, diamonds and stuff. You know, I never saw any in person. I only saw people like that in movies, you know, in like furs and stuff. And I thought, oh my gosh, but I went and gave the guy my name, and he went, oh, and he took me up where the balcony was and all the boxes, and I sat on the steps. And then the opera started. Well, I'd never heard opera in person, only on records, and I cried the whole time. The beauty of the human voice, and in the great opera hall. And I did the same thing. I had my head on my knees, weeping. And then they came and took me backstage, and there was all these people lined up to see the singer. And I thought, oh, he won't remember me. And then he saw me, and he had a cape on and everything. Just, you know, it was unbelievable. So then I went back to real life, and like 2 weeks later, I was in New York, and the head of my record company, Clive Davis, called me, and he said, your picture's in Billboard with an opera singer. And it was like punk meets opera or something. And it was me and Luciana Pavarotti. One of my favorite memories. Yeah.
Wow, I love that story.
Aren't you sorry you brought up the Finnish opera now?
No, not at all, not at all. In the book, you also talk about your friend Sandy and him sending you sending you opera records and such. It also seems like there's so many acts of pilgrimage in this book, and in M-Train particularly, where you're connecting with things that were beloved by people that were beloved to you. Where did the idea of pilgrimage start for you?
I don't know, but I've always had it. You know, I've always been curious. You know, I'd read books, and I always wanted to travel. I wanted to go to where they wrote about, or where the French Impressionists lived, or, you know, where, you know, Arthur Rimbaud wrote his poetry. I've always, and even fictional characters. Where did that fictional character live? I wanted to see the village of Pinocchio. And that's what I did when I got older, and for me, one of the most wonderful things about touring with a rock and roll band was that I got to see the world, and Finland, one of the first countries I went to. And it's just, it's like I had a pilgrimage with my sister just to look at the rooming house where we stayed when we were babies, you know, and we were toddlers, you know, to look at the church that I had been baptized. So some of it is from my own self, but I like to visit the resting places. I did a huge trek to go visit Sylvia Plath's grave, because it's in a very obscure area of Yorkshire. And, you know, I visited the home of the Brontes, and where Coleridge wrote, and I find that, you know, it's like just a wonderful part of life. You know, I've recorded horses in Electric Lady because it was Jimi Hendrix's studio, and it gives everything give him a hand. It just magnifies everything. For me, it just makes, you know, there's so much strife and terrible things in the world. I mean, anything that can make you happy, that can make you feel connected with the past, the future, with our cultural voice, with heaven, you know, is wonderful. So, yeah, I'm an old pilgrim.
To that end, do you think memory and remembering people I think particularly now at a time where the idea of the truth is being challenged in such writ large ways, does memory then kind of become not just against forgetting, but maybe like, is memory an act of resistance in a way, do you think? Or can it?
Well, I think, Gerard Nerval wrote in Aurelia that dreams give us a second existence, like a parallel existence. And memory does too. I mean, I miss my mother, but instead of, my memory is so present that I have my mother around all the time. In fact, sometimes I wish she'd take a powder, but just joking, Mommy. I try to go back, I try to think of, try to remember or imagine my ancestors, to sink back as far as I can, because the past, present, and future to me are in flux. I mean, that's sort of my belief system. Even afterlife, another part of the whole thing. I think of it as one fluctuant journey. And so, for me, memory, well, let's see, sorry, I'm getting, ask me something else. I'm starting to, to meander, and that can be really dangerous.
You're meandering right up to the curb of my question, so that was fated. There's a part in Year of the Monkey where you write, "It suddenly occurred to me that it wasn't really necessary I be at the hospital with Sandy," who's your friend who you're sort of holding a vigil for. "For the past 20 years, we have lived on opposite coasts, keeping channels open, trusting in the power of the mind to transcend 3,000 miles. Why should anything be different? I could keep a vigil wherever I may be, composing another kind of lullaby, one that would permeate sleep, one that would wake him up." How did you think you came to believe in that sort of power of this sort of, I don't want to say psychic connection, I don't want to word it for you.
Well, very early. I mean, when my mother taught me about God, and the idea that God, we don't see him, or we don't see God, but we can communicate through prayer, through thought. So at a very young age, the possibilities of communication through space, through time, became part of my belief system. So, as in time when I've lost people, I think of, I can still communicate with them. I can communicate with God, or I can communicate with my mother or my late brother. And, but also when I was a child, I was only a year older than my siblings. We were born right after World War II, like bang, bang, bang. My mom and dad were very busy. And so we're all a year apart. But I was somehow more advanced. I was more verbal. I read like at 3 years old. They were less verbal than I was, and younger. And we communicated all the time. Not even talking, we still talk about that. My sister and I still marvel that we would often, or we were punished and we weren't allowed to talk, but we would continue our play. And it was, one can believe it or not, but we know it is truth. We were so young, so innocent, that our channels were open, and we continued just sitting there being good, but still going on our fantasy journeys together. And so I've always believed that. It's not even a belief system anymore, it's just the way it is.
Sure, clap. Let's do it.
It also has a lot to do with love, trust, just being open, but a lot of it is love and trust, and since, like my friend who was in the hospital in a coma, I don't like hospitals, and I was torn about my lack of desire to be sitting next to him in the hospital. I really just don't like hospitals, being in hospitals. And that's what I was talking about in that passage. Well, he lives 3,000 miles away. We're always talking, mind to mind. So I can talk to him just as well on my adventures, and I didn't have to sit with him. And it wasn't a rationalization, it was as it was. So.
Is writing a form of prayer for you?
Well, writing is many things. I write every day. I write every morning and intermittently through the day. Sometimes it comes out like a prayer. Sometimes it's funny. Sometimes it's just my imagination let loose. A lot of improvising. I'm quite an improviser style writer. I don't think about what I'm going to write. I just sit down and just see where I go. And that's why I like this style of, it's sort of like a different kind of memoir. I don't even know what to call it, but I like this sort of semi-fictional, autobiographical fiction almost. And although there's a lot of fact in there too, real people who really exist. But it's many things for me. And sometimes, it has practical applications. I might be writing an introduction to an Emily Bronte book, so I have to study Emily Bronte and think about her and try to picture her. So that's a different kind of writing. So it just depends what I'm doing.
I think what was really encouraging to me as a writer in reading Year of the Monkey and then reading M Train again, preparing for this, was really your openness in your relationship and your sometimes craving for solitude and solitude as a place to sort of commune with yourself as a writer and to just be with your writing. Has your relationship to being alone changed over time?
Yes, certainly. When I was really young, I liked being with my siblings, but I didn't like being around people a whole lot. I just liked to be with my books. Of course, when I was a teenager, like any teenager, I liked my friends, and then I wanted like boys, and always wanted a boyfriend. And but after my husband passed away and my children grew, I found myself alone quite a bit. And then I found that I no longer really craved companionship. I was fine on my own. And I really don't get lonely. But I do have my own companions. Writing is my friend. This book was my friend. When I was done that book, I felt really sad. It was like the toothbrush. No, don't go. But I have good friends. I like my solitude, but I'm not a hermit. Like, my idea of solitude is going into a cafe, a quiet cafe, and sitting in a little corner and writing. So there's action, there's coffee, maybe there's music playing, but I still feel a little sense of aloneness. I'm not the kind of person that has to be in a room alone with, no one bothering me. I don't. It's not like that. It's more like a lack of responsibility. I'm just roaming around, doing my thing, and I can sit and write in a cafeteria with all kinds of stuff going on and the clanking of silverware, but I just have my little seat and my coffee, and I'm totally happy.
And do you carry a notebook when you're taking these notes during
Always.
the day?
In fact, funny enough, I brought my bag because it has my glasses in it in case I needed them. And my notebook is downstairs. And the last thing they said to me when I was going up the stairs is, "Do you need your notebook?" And I had to think about it, and I thought, no, it would be rude. But then when you said reinscribed, what was that word?
Reinscribed.
Reinscribed. See, I forgot it already.
I'll write it down for you.
I did feel to see if I had my notebook with me, but I left it downstairs. I carry a notebook everywhere. If I forget it, napkins come in. M-Train was written a lot on napkins because I'd run out of space in a notebook or forget it, and they'd go, the girl knew by then, and she'd go, she'd just bring me like a stack of napkins. And now I have a giant plastic bag, because they all get, it was like a bag that a pillow was in. You know, you buy a cotton pillow and it's in a plastic thing with a zipper. It's filled with napkins with all kinds of crap written on them.
Do you have to have a certain kind of notebook, or are you like anything will do kind of notebook?
No, I'm not. I like paper. I like smooth paper. I used to like to write on graph paper. Now I just plain white paper. I like those kind of. I like moleskin books. Truthfully, they have nice paper. But there's some new Japanese notebook that I found that has really smooth paper. But also, I'll write on anything. I mean, for goodness sakes, I have books that you try to read them, and I've invaded like all the margins because I didn't have anything else to write on. But I love notebooks. A lot of notebooks are given to me by people, and sometimes, one time a young kid made me a notebook, and I cherish that. I filled it up. My daughter learned to be a bookbinder, and she makes me notebooks. So, anyway, yeah, I like notebooks. Yeah,
that's very sweet. As much as we're talking about the past and memory and bringing people to life and all of these things, what's really, there's many things that are remarkable about your book, but one of the things that's most remarkable to me is that you don't seem particularly nostalgic, despite much of this work being like deep in the past. Well, do you think that's accurate? Like, maybe I'm sort of saying that's not like the sort of.
Well, I could say I think nostalgia is somewhat painful. It's beautiful but painful, and I wouldn't have known that as how to describe nostalgia. I don't think I'm so nostalgic as that I just carry past, present, and future with me continuously. But I saw this. I really like Japanese anime. And I really like, Ghost in the Shell has various series, and in one of them, the major, she's a cyborg, and she's entering into this space, and she feels, she's a machine, but she feels, she does have some bit of human soul, and she feels this strange feeling. She puts her hand on a doorknob and feels a shudder, and she's wondering what this strange feeling is. And then she goes into a place and she finds memory in this room. And she says, now I know what that strange feeling is. It's human nostalgia. And that really struck me because instead of it being a nice thing, she felt the pain of it, because nostalgia, is somewhat painful, because often it's nostalgia for something, our childhood, perhaps a dead friend, a beautiful meadow that's not a meadow anymore. So I guess we all have nostalgia within us, but I try not to exercise it too much, because truthfully, I have a lot of things I could be sad about, and I prefer to somehow allow myself to feel a certain loss and all, but try to turn that over. I miss my husband, I miss my brother, I miss my parents, I miss my dog, but I try to turn that over and think, wow, I had such an awesome dog, such a great husband. My mother was, made the best French fries, and other things. Anyway, basically, I guess I'm trying to say I try to allow myself to feel happy in the face of all the strife in the world, all the things that we're facing as Americans, as human beings, our personal things, our global things, our political things, climate change, all of these things that are pressing upon us. We have to keep a little path of joy moving through it, or we would have a terrible life. So I try to hold on to that and, just move a little happily through life, as rough as it can be. Thanks.
And that's really something that strikes me about a lot of your work, not just memoir, is that it seems like there is very much an acceptance of mourning as fundamentally part of life, and kind of how you're saying, like you allow it to sort of raise these other things up. And while your previous two books definitely seem like informed by mourning, this one is really about, in some ways, focuses on vigil and kind of those last moments or that last phase. How do you think maybe some of that in your previous work informed how you came to be with it?
I mean, I think that each time we lose a friend or a loved one, we learn a lot about ourselves and how we can face that or how we deal with it. But still, each loss is new, and you have different ways of facing it. But the difference is Year of the Monkey is not about loss. It's about two great friends who I knew almost half a century, both of them. One in a coma, struggling for his life, and one suffering ALS and the finality of this particular disease. And so it's really... it's more about that struggle. It's not about loss. It's more about negotiating the struggles of your beloved human beings. And so, it's a different kind. But in terms of mourning, my greatest lesson was when my brother died. My brother died suddenly of a faulty heart valve about a month after my husband. He was only 42, and we were very close. And he laughed a lot. He was very handsome, and he sort of looked like Paul Newman, but he was really funny, and we used to almost roll on the floor laughing, my sister and I. And when we were in the funeral home, my sister and I were sitting with the body of our brother, and we were heartbroken. But then I said something that, I don't know, triggered something, and it was just something that my brother Todd, my sister Linda, and I would have laughed about. And then Linda started laughing, then I started laughing, and we got the laughs, like we used. And we started laughing so hard with Toddy, which was perfect, really, because that's what we would all be doing. And the funeral director came and said, "Are you all right, miss?" Because he thought we were wailing. It was like we were just, it's the Irish in the family. So in any event, the real point is you have to live your whole life continuously. You can't say, well, now it's time to be sad because a really terrible thing happened. Sometimes you feel inexplicably happy or lighthearted in the middle of something. It's just important just to be a human being. And life, the whole package, we're all gonna suffer. We're all gonna get ill at some time. We're all gonna lose somebody we love. So, we just take it on. But, don't be afraid to feel joy in the face of sorrow, or to be like, the bummer at a party.
Words to live by. Be the bummer at the party.
That's me sometimes.
And I really loved that about Year of the Monkey, that it is really a testimony about friendship, being sustained in friendship. What are some of your favorite works, films, I know you're a big connoisseur of detective and crime shows, or movies, books. What are your favorite works of friendship?
My favorite works of friendship?
Yeah, that other people have made.
That they did or we did together?
I mean, either. Answer this how you will.
I mean,
You choose.
I mean, truthfully, I've been very fortunate to have, I'm a worker, and my greatest friendships have really been work-centric. I mean, Robert Mapplethorpe and I used to work on things together, and then even when we did the cover of Horses, he always called it our picture. And when I look at it, you know, I wrote this in the book, but when I look at the cover of Horses, I don't see myself. I see Robert and I see us, I see, and Sam Shepard and I wrote a play together, and I just gave him practical assistance on his last 2 books because at the last book he was unable to physically write. And I feel very proud to have assisted him. And I love his last book, Spy in the First Person, because it was his last work. He put everything that he had in this work. And it also appealed to me because, again, it was sort of nonfiction autobiography, a genre I really like. And Sandy Pearlman did beautiful. I love my friend Sandy Pearlman, who is in the book. He wrote a lot of the great songs for Blue Oyster Cult. He produced The Clash. And my favorite song of his is Astronomy, a Star, and a great Blue Oyster Cult song that he wrote. But I'm very lucky. I have, I have friends who are actors. I love Johnny Depp in The Hatter in Alice in Wonderland. I loved him in The Libertine. So Ray Fiennes is my friend, and he's great in everything. So I'm very lucky to have work-centric friends, and where we have a personal friendship, but a lot of our friendship is based on similar aesthetic, understanding each other's work, being able to talk freely about work, and that's a beautiful part of friendship for me.
You mentioned photography, and both Year of the Monkey and M-Train and many of your books also have Polaroids that you've taken and photos that you've taken. How does photography, or how has photography informed your writing and your work of writing?
Well, I always loved photography. I loved it since I was very young. When I spent half my childhood in libraries, and I loved Lewis Carroll. And once I found, he was a photographer. He took beautiful photographs. And learning about his photographs, I learned about Julia Margaret Cameron's photographs. And I've always loved photography. And I've worked, of course, with many great photographers. But when I was a teenager, I read Nadja by Andre Breton. And what really interested me was not just the text, was all these obscure photographs within the text that were taken by Man Ray. And I loved this genre of work, not even directly illustrated. It's not like drawings or something in fairy tale books. Just sometimes obscure pictures that somehow resonate the text. So when I did my first book, Babel, in '77, I did something similar. And I've pretty much had photographs in all of my books. But the nice thing about Year of the Monkey and M-Train, they're just my books. They're not, responsible to other people. They're just my life and my roamings around and my musings. So I just illustrated them the way I wanted with pictures that I take on the road. I mean, sometimes, it could be, an obscure Russian cafe, or, a defunct hotel, or some object that's important to the text.
Yeah, there's a part in Year of the Monkey where you're going through these piles of Polaroids that you have, and it's some of them are sort of, as you're saying, kind of banal and other ones more sacred, particularly of graves and homes of artists that you've loved. Do you have a favorite photograph of yourself?
That's a dangerous question. Well, I mean, I have favorites. It's hard for me to say a favorite. I like photographs where I look at, if I see a photograph that doesn't have to be flattering, but I feel like I know her. And it could be from any era. And a lot of the photographs I like are by my friend Judy Lynn, who took pictures of me in 68, 69, 70. She was one of the first photographers I worked with. And all our photographs, we imagined, were stills from French movies that weren't shot. And I like them very much. But I also, there's a picture of me taken in Chicago, like 1947, 48. I'm standing with my little haircut, my little bob, I think, and just with my hands like this, crying. And I still look just like that. I mean, I can look at that picture and go, yeah, I'm still her, you know, and I like that. I think probably one of my relatives took it, but it says like under it, all it says is Patricia, Chicago, you know, 1949 or something, but I like that. It's an anonymous photograph of me crying in Chicago.
I think we might all have those. So we have a little bit of audience Q&A happening, and the first, do we have the video? The first one is someone submitted a video question. So I think we're going to, if you can, pan ever so slightly to the video question.
Hi, Patti Smith. My question is, what can we learn from spending time alone?
What can we learn from spending time alone?
How cool we are. No, just...
All right, so we have some, I forgot my glasses, so I might have to hold this like all the way at your, there we go. Yeah, Jane from Evanston writes, how do you find joy in your daily life and what makes your heart sing?
Well, one of my favorite lines in rock and roll and in lyrics is Jimi Hendrix's "Hooray, hooray, I wake from yesterday." You know, I love this line, "Hooray, I wake from yesterday." It's just like, and I feel like that every day. In fact, the other thing that makes me feel like that is that the TV, when I'm on the road, there's this TV called LG or something. It's an LG TV or something. And when you put it on, at least in Europe, it says, it has this little guy and it goes, "Life's good." And it's called, in fact, when my TV's like 20 years old, it's like this big. When it breaks down, I'm getting one. And I love that. I put on the TV, and even if I feel like really grumpy or I don't feel good or I've been up since 4 in the morning, I put it on, it says, "Life's good." And you know, and it is. Even when it's bad, it's good. And thanks.
Let's hear it for life.
I get joy. Listen, I had really good avocado toast today. It was really good. It made me really happy. Sometimes I'll write something, it makes me happy. One of my kids feels good that day, or, you know, it's just, it could be anything, you know, a bird singing, or, you know, just, I don't know, the fog rolling in. I get happy. I'm like a cheap happy date, you know.
While we're on the topic of TV, one of the questions I had, because you talk about different relationships with different programs in both M-Train and Year of the Monkey. What are you obsessed with watching now, or is there something you're powering through?
Well, I like Endeavor. I like, I like all the British detectives. I watch Vera and Endeavor, and I like Masterpiece Theater. And what else do I like? Although I watch really weird things, like sometimes I'll watch Household International or something.
House Hunters International?
Yeah, I like to see the apartments they look at.
Same. I'm always loving it when it's, people hunting for like gargantuan, very like personality-free suburban homes, and I
watched the whole, was it the Movie Channel or something, showed like 7 different Godzilla movies in a row, each one worse than the next. They were awesome. The last one was so bad, it was in Japanese with like, you couldn't read the subtitles because they were blurry, and like they would show like buildings toppling, but you could tell they were like made of Legos or something. And also I like this, I watch a lot of Ghost in the Shell. Late at night, you can go to, Demand Channel and see like, 14 episodes of Ghost in the Shell from 2003 or something. So that's exciting. Yeah.
Trish, Mick, and Audrey would like to know, what music do you listen to at home?
Well, I listen to a lot of the music I always listen to. I like to listen to, like, sometimes I'll listen to Wagner, I'll listen to Maria Callas, Jimi Hendrix. I still listen to a lot of Jimi Hendrix, and Coltrane, My Bloody Valentine. And sometimes I'll listen to, like Fleet Foxes and the other day I went on the YouTube and watched a bunch of live performances by Billie Eilish. I watched her, so I was checking her out. She has cool moves. But I'll listen to a lot of stuff. I mean, when Rihanna did that song, I Want You to Stay, I listened to it 5,000 times. I like some pop music, I like Adele, but then on the other hand, I'll just listen to Coltrane for weeks on end and nothing else.
Do you have a favorite Chicago artist?
No.
We will tell them you said
I'm
that.
sorry,
Yes. It's okay. No pressure. Do you have Mindy Laugh, into that name? Do you have any interest in filmmaking, either as a director or screenwriter? Has film ever interested you in that way?
No, I think about that. I love film. I've always loved film, and there's such beautiful things still happening in film. You don't have to just go back to the French New Wave. I mean, there was that movie Cold War, and that particular filmmaker, and Phantom Thread, and there's just a million great films being done, a lot of interesting filmmakers, and but I think about that, but the trouble with being, I'm going to be 73, and I'm a grandmom, and I have kids, and a lot of that responsibility. I write all the time, and I perform with my band, and I'm a busy person. But maybe when I get older, I'll think about doing film stuff.
How about this? Can you recommend a film that we perhaps have not seen? Can you recommend something?
You mean like Creature of the Black Lagoon or something like?
What's a movie that, if you think everyone here watched, perhaps would hopefully change our lives for the better?
Oh,
open
I
our
couldn't
eyes.
predict that. I just know that, I don't look for film to change my life. I look for film to like open it, or just be beguiled, like Pan's Labyrinth or something, but you know, like my favorite movie is Andrei Rublev by Tarkovsky, and that takes a certain amount of patience, but the payoff is beautiful. And then there's Bresson's Alcazar Balthazar, which I think is like a genius film, not only beautiful, mystically beautiful, but also like an early rock and roll film without being a rock and roll film. So, you know, I could talk for hours about film. I really love it, but I wouldn't say what would change somebody's life. I mean, Pinocchio could change your life, you know, that's a very subjective thing.
Earlier you mentioned wanting to see where Pinocchio lived.
Pardon?
Earlier you mentioned wanting to see where Pinocchio lived as a child. Where did you imagine Pinocchio lived?
Near the Blue Fairy, you know,
Just around
down the road from the Blue Fairy, in Geppetto's little hut.
Let's see, we have 7 more minutes. Let's fill those. When everything, Ariel Tonkel writes, when everything around you seems to dissolve into chaos, how do you keep yourself grounded? Or do you? This preserves
No, I'm a
grounding.
pretty grounded person. I mean, I have to be careful not to get, just like everybody else, overwhelmed, anxious, even, I wouldn't say depressed, but, well, somewhat depressed about what's happening in the world. But I stay grounded in doing my work, because I like to work, and I do my work, making sure my family is good. And then the next level, I think of it as sort of radiating circles. I start with my work and my children, and then whatever I can do, you know, whatever civic duty I can do, speaking out, or sometimes all you can really do is just be as good a person as you can. And I don't want to start sounding like, you know, the Maharaji or something, but not that there's anything wrong, it's just that I'm not one. But there's a certain, if you go through life basically as a good person and just try to be as, you know, fair-minded as possible to the environment, to our species, to a river, to people, that energy reverberates and is infectious. You know, good is as infectious as evil. And we can see that evil is very infectious. We are living in times where a lot of corruption, bullying, all kinds of things are racism. The people who have that within them, it's being empowered by other people in power. But good can also be empowered. We can, you know, radiate and make that the new infectious disease. And, you know, it's just, I don't know.
I think we have time for one more. Let's see. There's so many good ones. What is your favorite memory of this year of your concert or book tours, and why? And this comes from Mary Ann from Detroit, with a heart next to Detroit.
Well, when I'm performing, I live in the present. And so I'm not, right now, where I am is where I am. And the people that I'm talking to and, you know, communicating with, all of us, is my main preoccupation, my main thought. And, you know, so, you know, it's just like work. People say, oh, what's the favorite thing you ever done? What I'm doing today. Because that means new possibilities, new hope, new friends. So we'll have to say today right now. So, but before we go, I thought it would be nice to, I don't have any instrument with me or something, but I thought it would be nice to sing a little song. And so I'll have to sing a cappella, but that's okay. Don't be afraid, because when I'm traveling in Europe, especially Italy, a lot of chefs like me, and they can't come out. They can't come to my concerts or something because they're working. So I'll go to their restaurant and go in the kitchen and sing to them a cappella. So I have some experience. So there's two things. I can either sing you a high-spirited song, or a spirited song, or a pretty song. So what are you in the mood? Oh, you would, right? I don't think we have enough time for two. So maybe I'll sing. Sorry. All right, I'll pick one that's, I think, somewhat pretty and high-spirited, okay? But this one is harder for me than others, so if you can help me with it, please do. I have to stand up when I sing, because I just do, so please stay there.
I'm going to remain seated.
No, stay there. Don't leave, just stay there.
I'm not going to leave.
Okay.
Where would I have to be? That's more important than here with you, Patti.
Okay. I'm singing in one of the great halls of Chicago. So the lyrics to this song, I didn't write the music to this song, someone else did, but the lyrics to the song were written for my late husband, Fred Sonic Smith, when he was my boyfriend. And it's funny, did you ever see that Mel Brooks' Frankenstein, and the girl, what's her name, the blonde? No, it's not her. She's the one, she plays the nurse or something, and they're asking, and she goes, yeah, Cloris Leachman, she goes, all right, okay, he was my boyfriend. Take me now, baby, here as I am. Pull me close, try and understand. Desire is hunger, is the fire I breathe. Love is a banquet on which we feed. Come on now, try and understand the way I feel under your command. Take me now, come under cover. They can't hurt you now, can't hurt you now, can't hurt you now, wow, 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 wow. Because the night belongs to lovers, belongs to us, because the night belongs to lovers, because the night belongs to us. Have I doubt when I'm alone? Love is a ring, the telephone. Love is an angel disguised as lust, here in our bed until the morning comes. But come on now, try and understand the way I feel under your command. Take me now as the sun descends. They can't hurt you now, can't hurt you now, can't hurt you now, wow, 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 wow. Belongs to lovers, because the night belongs to us, because the night belongs to lovers, because the night belongs to Chicago. Now here's the part. I'm not done, but get up, come on up. So here's the part where Lenny Kaye does his solo, and everybody gets up, and everybody's excited. And then I come to the microphone. Although we're filled with doubt, the vicious circle turns and burns. Without you, oh, I cannot live. Forgive the yearning, burning, I believe it's time to feel, to heal, and touch me now, touch me now, touch me now. Hey, because the night belongs to lovers, because the night belongs to us, because the night belongs to lovers, because the night belongs to us. Although we're filled with doubt, the vicious circle turns and burns without you. Oh, I cannot live. Forgive the yearning, burning, I believe. Oh, I went backwards. Oh, I'm sorry. I already sang that part. I'm sorry. Sorry. Because we believe in the night we're lovers, because we believe in the night we trust, because the night belongs to lovers, because the night belongs to love. Chicago Humanities. Thank you. You have to stand up.